Hi, and welcome back to my returning viewers. So at the time of me writing, the Warbond is only a few days old, and I have to say this one might be one of my new favorite Warbonds. From the weapons to even the armor passive, I love basically everything about it and have been dying to talk about it. So let's get right into it. This is How To. So to start out, this Warbond is the first one in a good while that has a completely unique toolkit, with every single piece of the Warbond being unique in at least one major way when compared to the rest of its class. The Warbond might also be one of the best as it offers a large variety in weapons and stratagems, with having strong versatility, firepower, and mobility tools. Speaking of weapons, let's kick things off with the new primary, the variable. Now, I have an entire video on the variable, but that video was insanely rushed and has by far the worst voiceover I've ever done. So, to retread old ground, let's start with the stats of the variable, which aren't bad. While it has the average Helldiver's worst nightmare of light pin, it still does decent damage, and it has an above average magazine size. But, come on, that's not really what this weapon is all about. See, stats don't exactly matter when you have three completely unique firing modes that offer different damage, recoil, and effectiveness. The first of which being a single fire, and it performs very much like a standard Liberator, with just more variety in your fire rate options. The second firing mode is volley, which fires off a volley of 7 shots at a time with a damage profile more similar to that of a shotgun. Lastly, total is every single shot in the magazine shot out at once, in one massive high damage shot. And after doing some basic math, that would mean that the highest amount of damage this weapon is capable of is an immense 4,165. This means if the variable hits a light pen weak point of a Hulk or a Charger, it one-shots them, which is absolutely insane for a primary weapon. Faction-wise, as you could probably tell, this weapon has a lot to talk about. However, for the sake of time, I will quickly go over its performance on each faction and give it an out of 5 rating. On the bugs, the variable basically does well against every enemy, aside from Impalers or Bile Titans, with its multiple firing modes all being great for tackling a different enemy, and thus making its overall effectiveness on this front a 4 out of 5. On bots, unfortunately this weapon suffers quite a lot, due to how bots fight you and this weapon's lack of spare mags, plus not being able to use its high damage to take out med pen weak points. You would really just be better off going with the Tenderizer or Standard Liberator if you want a light pen primary. While this weapon is still usable, it just isn't optimal for this front. 3 out of 5. Finally, I'll touch on Squids, which are the easiest and by far the best faction to use this weapon on. With its firing modes basically covering every single enemy type you could possibly run into other than Harvesters or, God forbid, a Leviathan, it makes it a very good pick on this front. However, keep in mind that if you ever want a total shot at Overseer, make sure you shred off its armor first, as if you don't, then its armor will absorb the entire total shot and then you wasted an entire mag doing basically 0 damage. On this front, this weapon is really only held back by firepower, 4 out of 5. But you know what doesn't have that firepower problem? The Epoch is the Railgun's older brother, with devastating AoE damage that can also one-shot heavier enemies such as Hulks and Chargers. This makes the Epoch like a buffed-up version of the recoilless HE round variation. Now, I know a lot of people dislike this weapon, but I honestly feel like it offers by far the most unique and versatile AT/core-to-clear playstyle, with it excelling at both duties. It's a middle ground option that I really didn't know I needed, but enough of me gushing about the weapon, let's get into its stats. Uncharged, this weapon does a pitiful 400 damage, but when you charge it up, it can get up to 800 damage, with damage fall off the further away the target is to the blast. Also note that you will know when you're at max charge when you see the plasma near the front light up and when the weapon goes. Just don't go holding down the trigger for too long. Now this all sounds well and good, but the plasma shot has very little weight behind it. But while it may not be great at taking on super heavies, for what you will mainly be running it into, it destroys. It also comes with 4 extra fuel cells, and per cell can fire off 3 shots before needing to reload, meaning you get 12 shots before fully running out. When it comes to playstyle, you can kind of switch between being extremely aggressive and being in the backline, acting as almost a mortar replacement. Well, you can whenever the gun actually wants to aim properly. You see, there's this bug that I'm not going to hold against the weapon at the moment, but it really hampers its effectiveness. Basically, the weapon is extremely inaccurate, kind of like firing a smoothbore musket. But getting back on track, basically you want to get up decently close whenever you want to aim for a weak point, such as when you're dealing with a heavier enemy. But for indirect shots and dealing with chaff or large numbers of enemies, you can really just stay at range and just throw plasma down range. But now, it's time to get into the factions. On bugs, stay at range and cosplay an automaton mortar with legs, and you shut down basically anything that breathes in your effective range. 5 out of 5. On bots, you usually want to be closer. A lot of enemies on this front require weak points to take out, and unlike the bugs, there just isn't as much chaff, so just staying at a range and abusing this weapon's mortar-like properties just isn't going to help you as much. As well as bots rarely swarm you as much as bugs, so you can also get closer, making this weapon still usable. So on bots, I'm going to have to give it a 4 out of 5. Squids, you want to swap between both due to the mix of Voteless and Harvesters. This weapon absolutely destroys Flesh Mobs and Overseers en masse, so just for that fact alone, 5 out of 5. But enough talk about firepower, and let's get into the first positive thing that came out of the Meridian Black Hole. The Warp Pack is by far the most unique item in all of Helldivers 2, with it being a literal teleporting backpack black hole. It even has the great quality of just being able to scramble you into a million pieces, but in all seriousness, when it comes to using this stratagem, try to space out your warps. Every 5 or so seconds should be enough to avoid the previously mentioned scrambling across multiple realities. However, if you do mess up your timing, you should be able to survive at least one failed warp attempt, so don't worry too much if it means scrambling some poor bug that made the mistake of even thinking it could walk in the same physical realm as you. You can also phase through buildings, and yes, even in the bunkers, where you super credit farming fiends. The Warp Pack, while fun, doesn't really have much to talk about and performs about the same on all fronts. It offers unique lethal lateral movement compared to the Jump Pack, just not nearly as much range. I'll quickly flash on the screen my personal rating on every faction, if I were to go into detail. It's extremely versatile, much like all the other backpack stratagems, so it works well regardless. But let's talk about the final new stratagem, the Laser Turret. Now, you might at first think it's just another sentry, but once again, it has a unique flair to it, with it overheating if it fires too much. It also has heavy armor pen, meaning that's actually able to harm heavy enemies. It's like a buffed up laser cannon. To touch back on its overheating, if it overheats for too long, it explodes in a big explosion, which can either be an upside or a downside, depending on whether or not it blows up right next to you, or next to an enemy. But even with the prospect of it exploding next to an enemy, it's still usually a downside most of the time, as just for the turret simply doing its job for too long, it just dies. And at higher diffs, it basically confirms that you won't get much more use out of it compared to the other turrets. Due to there not being much to talk about, I'll just go ahead and flash up the scores for every faction. Honestly, out of everything in this new warbond, the laser turret is a little underwhelming. I'll give it points for simply being unique, though. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Let's touch on the new grenade and passive. So, I see the passive being misused a lot, with many people just viewing it as a second life, when in reality, it's more of just an extra time or last stand type of thing so you can finish an objective. You shouldn't play any more ballsy with it like you would with Democracy Protects, just take advantage of it whenever it kicks in. Despite its downsides, I'd still say it's a good passive and I've been having a lot of fun with it. While it's not an active upside, it can be extremely helpful if you find yourself struggling to complete objectives in high tension moments. The grenade is just what we thought last Warbond's grenade was going to be. It destroys chaff, and while it doesn't stun, it staggers anything that it can't kill, and does a ridiculous amount of damage just by bouncing from enemy to enemy. Just watch out for friendly fires. One wrong move, and your teammate, without warning, is turned into jelly. Overall, I'd rate this warbond an 8 out of 10. Most of the time, we get fairly unoriginal weapons with very little to experiment with, so I'm extremely happy we actually got something unique here. Honestly, in my opinion, everything here could be utter garbage, and I'd still at least give this warbond a 6 out of 10, just because of how much fun everything in it is to use. And a lot of the stuff in here just really reminded me why I enjoy playing Helldivers 2 so much. So that was the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. While it was a bit more work than my usual upload, it was fun to finally work on a larger project. That said, I'll see you all next week whenever I either decide to do a discussion video or cover another warbond, which I'm not going to spoil yet, but it's one of my personal favorite warbonds that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. Also, I likely won't ever upload smaller videos like I did last time. I've just come to terms that I'll never be able to keep up with the absolute YouTube demons that cover new content on this game extremely quickly. But thank you all for getting this far, and see you next time. Bye-bye.